Before we start, can we get everybody inside? We're going to start in another 2 minutes. Okay, good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? I trust you are all doing fine. Um, this is the Redeemed Christian Church of God, Agape House, Nashville here, and we want to welcome everyone to our service this morning. For those who are in the sanctuary right here, we welcome you, and those joining us online, we welcome you as well. As you know, on the last Sunday of every month, we start our service with the empowerment program. This is a program where we interrogate different subjects relating to different areas of life. We deal with issues like relationship, marriage, finance, career, and so on. And so this morning, as you know, we are in the month of February, and that's the Black History Month. We want to devote our discussion this morning to the Black experience. We want to learn a little bit about Black history. And so we will be talking about issues related to the struggles of African Americans, achievements, contributions to American history, and also global history as well, and global progress. So this morning, the topic of our empowerment program is the Black experience, memory, identity, and community engagement. And to help us understand this subject, we have our guest here, Dr. Marquita Reed-Wright. And I would like to take a moment to introduce her. Just a short introduction. Dr. Reed-Wright is an assistant professor of public history at Tennessee State University. Her research centers on the utilization of popular culture and material culture as related to African American history. Her work has explored the theme of identity and memory within the African American community. Dr. Reed-Wright obtained her PhD in public history with a specialization in material culture and African American history from Middle Tennessee State University. Apart from being an academic, he has substantial expertise in museum and archival management. So, Professor, on behalf of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, we welcome you here. We thank you for answering our call to be our guest this morning, and we look forward to a very interesting discussion this morning. And of course, as the interviewer, you all know me. I don't need to introduce myself, but in case you don't know me, I'm Adebayo Yebade. I happen to be a professor of history as well at Tennessee State University. Dr. Reed is actually my colleague there. But right now, I'm wearing a different hat as assistant pastor here at Redeemed Christian Church of God, Agape House. So without further ado, I will set the ball rolling. I will ask a couple of questions, and then I will throw the discussion over to the audience. But before we do that, can we please ask those outside to come in? Everybody has to be in. Now, the professor, I want to start this interview with your own personal journey as a public historian. How did you come about an interest in public history? I know apart from being a scholar, you've held positions in institutions of historical preservation, including National Museum of African American Music. So let's start from here. What is public history? And specifically, how does material culture in terms of monuments, commemorations, archives and so on, how do that shape history?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. First, thank you for having me here. Thank you. So first, my own journey to public history started because I loved museums growing up, and I love music. I grew up around music, and my mom took me to a lot of museums growing up, to the point where, especially in church, my mom sang in a gospel choir. That's where she met my dad. He was a guitarist in a gospel group. Yeah. So growing up around a lot of music, and so as I got older and in college, I thought, how can I combine my love of music, my love of museums, and just history all into one? Yeah. And it just happened by coincidence and happenstance, and sometimes doors just open. I was working for the Florida Department of Emergency, and they had a preservation program, because Florida hurricanes preservation, and then just one step after another to there, and then I ended up studying public history, museum studies, and ended up here in Tennessee. What public history is, in a nutshell, it is making history accessible to the public, not using a lot of academic terms all the time, having history programs such as this one to talk about history and discuss history. That could be in museums, that could be with talks, music programs, monuments as well. And material culture is a part of history. Material culture is just all culture, things that have been used, things that are made, songs, my personal interest right now, food, all food, is a part of public history. And material culture. So material culture is looking at what has been used and made, both by a certain culture or people, and using that to understand their history, and their experience. So for me personally, especially working at the National Museum of African American Music in Nashville, types of material culture I was collecting were songs, were pamphlets, anything relating to that historical narrative.
Yeah, thank you for taking us through your journey as a public historian. Yeah, you mentioned gospel song. Yeah, here in Agape House, of course, we do a lot of that in our worship. So one of these days, you may want to come back and see our worship. We have a very powerful choir here. Okay, let's focus more on the on the on the Black History Month. I believe it's not just for Black people. It's a celebration, or this is a celebration of African American or Black history achievement, and so on. It goes beyond that. It's for all people. We need to celebrate, because Black history is an integral part of American history and in fact of world history. And we know that this is 2026. The Black History Month started 100 years ago. Started in 1926. And I believe that of course, we have grown a lot in terms of achievement of Black people where we are. We are not where we used to be. There's been tremendous progress in the last 100 years in all areas of life, in the political area, economic area to some extent, and so on. But what are some of the significant challenges that we still face as a people in this day and age, and how do you overcome those challenges?
I would say some of the challenges we still face. One, in particular, we all face both as Black Americans and just Americans all is socioeconomic challenges we all face. No matter who you are, background, you will be affected and touched by the things that trickle down and happen economically. So I think in our society, that's one thing that we do face. Another is teaching Black history. Because I have heard from some younger people, it seems that it's all depressive, um, and they don't want that anymore. They just want we're not there anymore. So connecting those parts together, I think, is one of our challenges. We have to be able to say, no, we're not in 1961 anymore. We're past that. However, we still have to understand what was fought for and keep fighting for it to make sure we can maintain and hold on to those rights. I'm seen as a historian who has seen the cyclical nature of history, and how quick achievements can happen, and then they can be taken away a generation or two later. I think that's one of our biggest challenges, just for me, just being a teacher and having younger children, ages 10 and 13. I have been told by them too, oh, it's so depressing, the history. I'm like, yes, it is, but we have to remember it. So I think it's one of our biggest challenges, is getting young generations to know and understand the history without feeling, I guess, I don't hate to say the depressive nature of it, but without feeling weighed down by it. I think they just feel weighed down when we talk about it, and that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to help them understand, just to remember the past, so we can keep fighting for a better future.
Yeah, so the summary is to keep the momentum going.
Yes.
We can see that we have arrived, we hold our arms and say, okay, everything's going on right. So even as the new generation, we need to remember the past, what the fight of the older people,
Yes.
and continue to keep the momentum going. Yeah, thank you for that explanation. I want to shift attention to community engagement. I know that you've done extensive work, within the Black community. Now, we are a church. Now, as a faith-based organization, how can we contribute to solving some of these challenges that you have outlined? So, how do we best engage as a church, within the community towards the progress of the society?
Okay. I'll give you some of my personal experience with that. I grew up primitive Baptist. And so one thing I understand is always coming from a faith-based community and reaching out to the community is to, in a lot of ways, meet the community where they are. You can't force anything on people, but meeting them where we are with open arms is a really good way to have them come in. And also holding programs like this is very good as well, because you're also teaching in a welcoming way. And you mentioned each month there's a different theme, which is really good, because someone may not attend church regularly, but having a conversation about finances, everyone does need that. So that is a really good way to do it. Meeting them when they are and offering programs, opportunities to bring people in is the biggest way to do it. Of course, there's always, the giving with, food drives and clothing and things like that. But the programs you just mentioned are wonderful, because that is a great example of meeting the community where they are and inviting them into these spaces to talk about things that are impacting their everyday lives, like finances, relationships, and even learning a little bit of Black history.
Yeah, thanks. Beyond the farming program, we are engaged here in the community. We do taxes for the community. Sometimes you go downtown and help feeding, the poor and so on. So we do a lot of that. So it's not just, church is not just a place where, I know the focus is on, salvation and so on. But at the same time, we live in the community. And we can't afford to isolate ourselves from the community. We have to play a role in helping the community. At this time, I will open the floor for comments, questions from the audience, and then we'll go on from there. Do you have any questions? You have questions. This is, opportunity to study or to learn about history. Somebody said, one professor said that if you don't know from where you are coming, you don't know where you are going. So, okay, so we have one question coming from that angle.
Good morning. Thanks for the educative information you're giving us. I want to ask some few questions too, probably just two. How do you cope with workplace discrimination? It's something I personally face almost whenever I travel for my work. Because I work with hospitals, nurses, doctors, and I kind of teach people how to use some softwares here and there. But then, maybe people hate my guts. I don't know. But I get to have this throw at me serious discrimination. That's number one. Number two, how do we deal with people who literally do not know their history? They are blacks, but they do not know their history. But you see them taking sides from the wrong part of the table. How do we deal with issues like that?
To your first question, first, I'm sorry you have to deal with that, but I do. From two angles, being black and then being a woman, I have faced that a lot. I do black history, but that often takes me outside of black spaces into other spaces where people don't respect it or my degree. I one time had a job. I was working in building a museum, and one of the contractors refused to pronounce my name right, purposely. It was a thing, yeah, purposely, and it was never Marquita. It was always Marquetta or what's your name? And I didn't know how to address it. The way I wanted to address it wouldn't have been great. Luckily, one of my colleagues, older white gentleman, contractor, wonderful woodworker, he goes, well, if you can't say her name right, just call her doctor. And from then on out, that is how I started dealing with people who I can tell just refused, and most of them were like older white men who wouldn't want to pronounce my name right. It would be, well, just call me doctor. I would go back into just my professional bag. Well, I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional at this. No, I can't build a chef, but I have written a narrative for this museum. I have worked with a designer. I know what they want. So just call me doctor, and doing that professionally, because it does weigh you down, especially when you know you've worked so hard to get here. And then having that dismissed is very hurtful, and it is discriminatory. That is one way that I have started just dealing with it, from a very, don't get angry, don't get mad, just remind them of who you are. Taking from Black Panther, the mother. And that's what I do. When I walk into a room and I fill it out, they may say I am being a little too uppity or bougie, but I don't care. If I can tell you're not going to respect me right off, I just go and say, hey, I'm Dr. Reed Wright. I'm Dr. Reed Wright. You have to respect what I'm saying. And to your second question, with people not understanding their history, unfortunately, and I'm just going to throw that out there, with the current situation we live in, history is being rewritten, and kids are not being taught what they should be taught in school. Once again, I have two kids. One of them took a pop quiz on something they hadn't even learned about yet. And she goes, the only reason I barely passed it was because you're my mom. They hadn't learned anything yet about enslavement. And she's in 8th grade. And she was like, that's the only reason me and one of my friends passed, because you're my mom and we talk about things. And, I kind of tell my friends what we talk about. And that's why she's like, we barely passed, but that's the only reason. So I'm seeing it happen. Only thing to do is take them to the museums, take them, if they're in your personal space in life, take them to help them learn, because it is systematically happening where they're just not teaching it purposely in schools anymore, especially in public schools. And that's just the only thing we can do. And historians like me and public historians constantly trying to make sure everyone knows. Some people are going to purposely not want to know. And then there's nothing you can do about it at that point. Just reach who you can would be the only advice I can give you for that one, because I've known some people like that, and they purposely just don't want to know. And one of those reasons is because they think it's just so sad and depressing. They don't want to know the history. And yes, it is sad. It's some of it is depressing, but there are so many triumphant moments, especially in the fact that within the African diaspora, we have created so much amazing culture that people need to know about. So that would be my main thing for that one. Teach who you can, and don't let the other people get your blood pressure too high, as my grandmother would say, because it's not going to help anybody. Yeah.
Okay, when you was speaking, I was thinking. So I said earlier on, the chair of her department, and I think I should not make mistake in pronouncing your name. Yeah, but
I think with your accent, you won't just because.
Yeah.
So that I understand. You're not purposely trying to yeah.
Yeah, okay. She's a wonderful member of our department. She's a great scholar. Do we have another question? This is time for the audience to raise questions or make comments. We have here somebody here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Reedwright. My question is about giving the right information to students concerning the history. And also, I also want to ask a question about building relationship between Africans and African American. One thing I enjoyed when I joined this church is program like this, because we have invited a lot of guests and they have opened our eyes to so many things we do not know. And I believe, I'm speaking the mind of most of us, we appreciate the sacrifices they have made for us to be able to live here. However, I don't know if African American community is doing anything to accept African community, because when we live in separation, we see ourselves as, we allow our differences to overshadow what we share in common. It will be difficult for us to work together in unity. So I would love to know if there's anything that African American community is doing to accept Africans as part of them.
For that one, I can only speak to my personal experience, and because I move around in very different, broad communities, mostly because I do history, so I'm kind of a history nerd, but I'm also a nerd in other areas where I like gaming and anime and stuff like that. So that has allowed me to move in different communities where I meet African people, and we find a common ground, a bond, something to talk over. And unfortunately, sometimes within those communities with the same people, some of our common bond is, hey, we're at this convention, and those people are just being mean to both of us because we're black, unfortunately. But from my experience, we're meeting in different places just because of my interest. But for the broader experience, unfortunately, you are right. There's not a lot of meeting ground. And I think that just comes from just years from both sides of not understanding, years from there being a conversation at a certain point where, why haven't Black Americans achieved as much? You have this great land of opportunity, but you have to understand the history in that land, and that it's like when you break something, a vase, it takes years to put it back together. So it has to be an understanding on both parts, with African people understanding, hey, Black people went through a lot. They're not going to be, all the way there yet. They're still recovering. And then Black American communities have to understand that we need to embrace African people because that's a part of us. And if, I mean, honestly, quite speaking, I'm a historian. For me, it's, especially food historian, food history. I'm sorry, I'm greedy. I like food. Um, Learning more about food history, like I learned why, just through my conversations, my interactions, why Black Americans love sweet potatoes. It was because it was the closest thing to a yam that we could get our ancestors get our hands on when they get over here. And this person was from Nigeria. She's like, you want to see what actual like yam like looks like? I was like, oh my god, that's huge. And she cooked it for me, and it was wonderful. But that's just because of the world I circled by travel in. So I have been to and take my kids to, my mom and sister to a lot of, once again, food, cultural events. And we get to learn that way. So it opens the door that way. But it's a lot, I think, honestly, it's a lot of hurt on both sides. Being a part of the culture historian also means that sometimes I have to look at the comments of things. My husband hates it. He's like, why do you read comments? Like, I got to know what's going on with the people. And those comments from both sides, I'm like, we don't understand each other at all, and we need to. And we also need to understand that at the end of the day, we're all fighting the 1% who doesn't like anybody. So that is one thing I think we need to have more of. More spaces, offline spaces, where there are no comment section to meet and talk. It's that comment section where people they just say anything. But we have to create more spaces like that we can meet and talk. And learn about what each other went through, because as first and second generations, it wasn't easy for you or your parents either. So why do we think it wasn't. So we need more things like that. And as far as how to get students right information, it's harder for public school teachers because they are mandated. My sister teaches in public school, and so does one of my cousin-in-laws. And so they have to be careful about what they say and teach. Even professors to an extent have to be careful. But I get a little leeway because, I specifically, focus on African American history. So if my students are taking my African American experience class, you know what you're getting. I used to teach a class that was just African American Part 1 from 1619 to 1890. Because I always say you can't understand Reconstruction without understanding years afterwards. And we specifically talked about Black people in American history, food culture, craftsmanship. And one of my biggest lectures I give is called The Paradox of Liberty, where we talk about the Founding Fathers, and we talk about how when they were fighting for property, enslaved people were a part of that property. And so I get to teach things like that. That's why my kids know things like that. But I think honestly, I think a middle school teacher could teach that lecture and not get in trouble, because you're still talking about revolution in American history. You're just introducing the fact that there were Black men who fought as patriots. So that could be one way to introduce some Black history without getting into too much trouble, I think. Just slowly introduce Black people who did things. I think that would be the best way for public school teachers to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Laleye, for asking that question. It's a conversation that we need to be having often. I know it is real, the simmering tension between African Americans and Africans. There's specifically from the Africans that, these people, they are lazy, they've been here for a long time, they are not doing well. And conversely, African Americans may think that these people are taking our jobs and so on. So there's mutual misunderstanding that we just have to begin to address those issues. I'll come back to the audience, but that question brings me to a question I want to ask. A few years ago, a Black GOP candidate contesting for election said if he won, that he would banish Black History Month. And in fact, to quote what he said, Black History Month is offensive unfair, maybe illegal. That's what he said. And incidentally, this person came from Nigeria. Incidentally, I won't mention names. So he made that statement. Now, is Black history anachronistic? Is it, can you say we are in post-racial America? You know, as I said earlier on, we have arrived, there's no need for Black History Month, you know. So why don't we have other cultures having their history month, like the Latino History Month and so on. So what do you think about what this person said?
So I will say that we need all the history months. And I'll give this example from a few days ago. I gave the lecture on a more academic scale at another college, The Paradox of Liberty. I had a professor tell me, I never knew that about considering the founding fathers thinking that property wasn't just tea, but also people. And they never knew about the people, the Black men who fought on both sides. Some fought for Britain, some fought for the Patriots. And that's why we need Black History Month. If another professor can tell me that, like, oh, I never knew that, considered that, it means that we still need to tell these stories. And unfortunately, they are being purposely taken out. And this big, safe narrative of just American history was very streamlined. It's happening. And so that person should never said that at all. And the reason there is Black History Month or a Latino History Month is because those stories have been purposely, honestly, left out. And so people need to learn them. If people are more okay with a middle school teacher talking about the paradox of liberty without saying, oh, you're making my kid feel like the founding fathers were horrible, then maybe we could talk about not having a Black History Month. But because people still feel certain ways when we talk about the actual American history, we have to have those spaces where people feel safe enough in those months where we can have conversations like this about history and where people can learn about those types of history. I think Black History Month and all other months will always be here and stay here, whether they're federally recognized or not, because people like historians and just community members are going to want them and have them.
Yeah, as you said earlier on, Black History Month should not be perceived for the perspective of just Black people. It's history of America, you know. And sometimes we are ignorant of that spirit, of that history. So we need to have a time that we need to just reflect on that history. It has been neglected, you know, for so long. I think we can take one or two more questions from the audience. Okay, over there.
There is a movement currently, I don't know whether you know about it. There's a group of African Americans who call themselves FBAs, Foundational Black Americans. They say that they never came from Africa, that they have always been here, that they were around with the Indians. And now you see them, they talk about delineation, that they want to delineate. You have these three, I know three prominent people. Amongst them, Phil Scott, I know he's based in Texas. There is Tariq Nasheed. Yes, that's the person that actually came up with that concept. And there is a woman, an elderly woman that, you know, if you listen to the things she says, they are actually very, very, let me say, things that, you know, encourage hate. Yes, Madame Boulay, that's her name. So what do you think can be done about this? Thank you.
Yes, I have heard of that movement. I kind of laugh, but I shouldn't have, because for me, I don't take any of them seriously. It's unfortunately they are spewing hate, but at some point we do have to take them seriously because they keep talking about just horrible things. One, none of what they're saying is really based in any historical fact, and it'll be very easy to prove them wrong. I honestly feel like my 10-year-old could prove them wrong. just because of how we teach her. But also, we also have to, and I hate to say this, we have to understand why they're doing this. That's the big thing. They're doing this so they can separate themselves from blackness and align themselves with who they think is going to be in power. And they're doing it from a place of fear and survival and hatred. And one of the biggest ways to combat that is like, well, historically, you're wrong. This is not true. And also keep teaching the true history, because now it's another thing to that is talking about those who are descendant from the enslaved, like myself, being another form of foundational American, because they're trying to create American identity and what it means. And this is not the first time it's happened. It happened in the 1920s. It happened in the 1930s. It happened in the 60s. It happened in the 1830s when a bunch of Irish immigrants came over here. They tried to define who was a foundational American and who was not. It's going to keep happening, unfortunately, because cyclical, that's just how history works. So the best thing we can do is, I had a conversation with someone else the other day, and he told me one of the best things that he loves about this country is that it's made up of so many different people and cultures. And that is what true American identity is. It is this patchwork quilt of cultures. And if we can keep pushing that idea of a patchwork quilt that works together to create something beautiful and live up to those true ideals of the revolutionary spirit, we can fight back against these people. Because he was right. America, the identity of America is a patchwork quilt. The culture of America is a patchwork quilt of different people coming together to create something great. And that is one of the biggest things we can do to push back against people like that. Because if they want to talk about foundational Americans, then honestly, all of us have to get up and leave right now and go back, and let Native Americans have what was theirs before anybody came over here. Because they are probably going to talk about before the continent split and all the migrations and stuff, but there's no proof of any of that ever happening. So they're wrong, and we just have to push back the best way we can against them historically and talk from a place of love and acceptance in our patchwork quilt than anything else.
Yeah, fortunately, we have less than 2 minutes, and I will not be able to take any more questions from the audience. Since I'm the one holding the microphone, I have the advantage of asking the last question. And this is like, give us a reflective comment. And this is based on the issue of what's going on now, when government is defunding diversity programs. Of course, especially those that can enhance Black studies. So what is your take on that?
My take on that is, once again, one reason they're doing it is because they're trying to create this narrative of what American identity and history is while erasing others. And they're doing that through academia, to control what people can say and teach. But it's not, I hate to say this once again, it's not the first time this has happened, and we have survived it. That's one of the reasons we do have Black History Month, honestly. We have survived it, and if we all of us can once again come together and fortify our institutions, have those who are in power hold up, as Du Bois would say, close ranks, but close ranks on with each other to stop this from happening. We can fight back against it, and we will ride this wave and survive it, because it's not the first time, it will not be the last time, and we can create new strategies from this, which we have been doing already, to combat this. Because personally speaking, I have some grants that I was going for one of my newer projects. They're gone now. And I have had to try to find ways and different partnerships to get it done. So that's one thing that's come out of this. It's forcing me to grow and find new ways to raise the money and work within the community.
Yeah, so those of us that are teaching in institutions, colleges, we can relate to this. Even there are some words you can't use in the classroom these days, apart from cutting of funds. Fortunately, every road that has a beginning must have an end. So we can continue these discussions later on sometimes, but at this time we just have to end the program. And I want to thank Dr. Makita Wright again for honoring us with your presence. We really enjoy, the conversation, and we'd love to have you back again sometimes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.